Vapor face! What's up, vape fam? Sorteal here, and welcome to the Vaporworks lab. Today we're going to take a look at the Recurve version 2 from Wotofo and Mike Vapes. Now I've already got this thing set up, sitting on the Dreamer here with this low profile drip tip from Signature Tips, and it's pretty much replaced the drop 1.5 that I had on here. If you guys remember, I had the drop on here because I like low builds with mechanical mods, and most of the RDAs were getting, relatively hot after, vaping it for a little while. And with that low profile drip tip, I really don't have much of a choice except for my lips to hit the RDA itself. With the drop 1.5, it's just so tall, and the way the airflow is kind of stacked there on the side, it allowed heat to dissipate out of that RDA relatively quickly. So I didn't have the issue of kind of burning my lips on the damn thing. Well, the Recurve actually kind of does similar. It doesn't really get overly hot. I think it has more to do with the peak airflow inserts, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. But I'm able to vape on this thing, even chain vape on it, and it doesn't get overly hot up at the top there, so I don't really have to worry about burning my lips. So this has probably replaced the drop 1.5 on the Dreamer for now. Let's take a toot. Flavor off this thing is absolutely amazing. It has some of the best flavor out there. It stands up to some of the best, like an RDA for vaping, the Nightmare 25, the Kali 2. It's not quite as good as the Asgard Mini, but it's definitely up there with, like I said, those dual coil RDAs that I consider at least to be some of the best for flavor. And it stands up to the nitrous in dual coil mode. So I think this is probably going to become one of my favorite dual coil RDAs out there. Now, I did mention airflow inserts, and let's take a look at the single coil airflow insert here. These airflow inserts are made out of PEEK, and I was a little concerned about that at first because so many RDAs that use a lot of PEEK, more so than just the insulation for the positive posts, they tend to kind of melt and burn if your coil gets too close to it, or it just gets overly hot. But these don't really suffer from that. This is a very hard PEEK. It's not the kind of soft PEEK that you find being used as an insulator for positive posts in RDAs or around your 510 drip tip. About to lose it there. So it really kind of alleviated all the concerns I had about this being made out of PEEK and not something like Ultim. So I have not burned or melted this at all, even with that 5mm ID coil. I did try that out in single coil mode, but I'm just not a fan of the 5mm coil. Basically, it takes a huge flavor hit. So you would think that with more surface area to cover the cotton and to vaporize liquid, that the flavor would go up. It's kind of the whole thought process that goes on with mesh. But with the 5mm coil, it just doesn't happen. Flavor actually goes down. It may be the ohms that thing is set at. It's like a 0.65, but I don't really think it's so much that. I just think that 5mm coils overall don't produce better flavor. They actually have worse flavor. It's kind of the same thing when I tried a 4mm ID coil in this. Flavor took a slight hit, but if you use a 3mm or 3.5mm ID coil, the flavor in single coil mode is banging. Not quite as good as, say, the nitrous in single coil mode. Not as good as, say, something like the Hadley or Elder Dragon, but it is very good in single coil setup. You also get this here in the package, which I kind of really dig. If you can see there, if it would focus, one side is 3mm, the other side is 5. So if you have your own, say, spooled coil, you can make your own 5mm ID coils or 3mm, and it also kind of works for adjusting your coil on the deck itself. Let's see if we can take a look at this deck here. There we go. I kind of wiped this insert off. It had liquid all over it, slipping and sliding everywhere. Now we're going to take this cotton out of here. All right, we're gonna re-wick this thing. I'm gonna show you guys the deck a little more up close, show you the absolutely insanely deep juice wells. Also, the deck is kind of raised up above the juice well and where the squonk flow comes from. So I think this thing will perform just outstanding as a squonker. The hole is kind of underneath the curved deck itself. Now that might not make a whole lot of sense, but I'll show you what I'm talking about. So when juice comes up, it's not going to kind of drown your coils. It will more come up and then just go directly to your wick. So I think this will squonk phenomenally. All right, let's take a look at this thing here. There is the coils I had in place. They're a little hot because I burned them, or I dry fired them, got all the crap off. There is those insanely deep juice wells. And if you can see underneath there, looks like a giant hallway. And at the bottom there is where your hole for your squonking liquid comes into play. So it just kind of goes up and then goes directly to the juice well. It's never actually going to come up and, you know, get to these coils itself. It's only going to get to the wicking. Now, some squonkers might not like that, because some people that squonk, they like to be able to over squonk to the point the liquid actually gets to the coil itself. Some people consider it more flavorful that way, but overall, I think this will squonk just absolutely beautifully. There's that kind of concave recurve deck. Now it curves both ways, so it curves this way, but also this way, and that made me a little worried at first, because I thought, you know, how is the liquid, at least all of it, going to get into the juice well? So if you're dripping, you're going to have a little left over that's just going to pool there in the middle. But so far that has not been the case at all. As you guys can see here, there's no liquid there, just kind of chilling there in the middle. Overall, this thing's pretty easy to build on. You want to make sure you cut your leg leads pretty long. These are cut, I think, at about a 9mm leg length. And it's essentially what's going on is, if you can see where your screws are, they're way down here, but the inserts for your leg leads are way up here. So they're kind of clamping farther down in there. So you need to make sure your leg leads are actually pretty long. Otherwise, you know, you're just not going to get a very good grip on it. Also, I had a bit of an issue with this where the 510 pin was not properly screwed in. So I kept getting a short. I actually kind of wasted a pair of coils because I kept trying to crank down on it, move it around, figure out what was going on. And it took me a minute to say, okay, maybe I should check the 510 pin. So once I did that, that kind of solved all my issues with this. So make sure when you get this, check your 510 pin, make sure it's screwed down tightly. Really, you should be doing that every single time. You should make sure everything is secure and in place as soon as you get your RDA, RTA, RDTA, anything like that. Any rebuildable, make sure everything is screwed down in place properly. All right, let's wick this bad boy up, and then we will come back up, vape on it, and I will tell you guys a little bit more about this Recurve version 2. All right. Here we go. We got our wicks in place. I'm going to thin these out just a hair. Do a little under action for Mike Vapes. You guys know me, I don't thin my wicks out like all kinds of crazy. Just enough is my kind of go-to. And as I've said before, I think that kind of comes from squonking, where you don't really want to thin it out too crazy, because with squonking, you want the wicks to retain a lot of that liquid. All right. Now these juice wells, I'm just kind of doing it down and dirty. Sorry, guys. No finesse here. And I'll straighten it up after the fact. No finesse on this channel, by God. And I can't really do the Mike Vapes little flip job that he does. But honestly, with this RDA, you don't have to, you know, make it look super pretty. You don't have to make sure your wicks are in there just perfect. You can kind of shove them down in there and then straighten them up some after the fact. Pretty much what I'm doing here. I think that looks pretty good. Yeah. All right, let me juice this up. And yes, if you can't already tell, I'm going to fire this on a mechanical mod. Don't be me. Don't do this. Honestly, this is stupid. Like, you should never do this. You should never wick and then fire or build at all on a mechanical mod, but I don't feel like swapping it out. And I had this already built on here before, so I know I'm probably not going to get any kind of issue. But you can never be 100% about that, so... All right, there we go, all juiced up, ready to go. Little excess right there. All right, here is our airflow insert. It just kind of sits down right on top there. I don't know if I could find the damn holes. There we go. And it actually fits really snug. I thought they were going to be loose and this really wasn't gonna work near as well as it should, but overall it works fabulous. All right, let's put this top back on here. Now on the airflow here on the side, I want to show you guys this. It kind of cuts down a row at a time on the top 2 rows. So you can cut down just the very top row, then you can kind of slowly cut down the second row, but there's no option to cut down the bottom row. And I think that's good, because who really wants to do that? If you're trying to cut it down that much, you might as well start looking at MTL RDAs, because that's the type of restriction you're looking for. So I normally cut the top row of airflow and that's it. So let's turn this off and then take a toot. Oh yeah. As I was talking about flavor, so when I think of flavor with dual coil RDAs, and actually I think dual coil RDAs are some of the most flavorful. Sometimes with single coils, you can kind of get the subtle nuances of a recipe. So you can kind of taste all the layers a little bit more distinguishably than you can with a dual coil setup. But for overall in your face flavor, I normally think dual coils are more flavorful, or mesh, but we're not talking about mesh right now. Shut up, Sorteal, not a mesh episode. All right. So with this, I think it definitely stands up to some of the all-time greats. And for me, with RDAs, that would be the Asgard Mini, RDA for vaping, Nightmare 25, Kali 2, and the nitrous, really. And this stands up to all of those except for the Asgard Mini. And now it's not like the Asgard Mini just blows the doors off of this thing. It's just the Asgard Mini is a little bit better. I don't really think there is a coil RDA out there that can stand up to the Asgard Mini, honestly. So it's a really high bar. But if you've ever tried an RDA for vaping or the Nightmare 25, you know both of those RDAs have absolutely outstanding flavor. This is as good as both of those. The nitrous, I think it's one of the most flavorful RDAs out there, and this pretty much stands up to the nitrous in dual coil mode. Now, if you're using the single coil airflow insert and building single coil on this, it's not going to be as flavorful as the nitrous in single coil mode, but with dual coils, and I really think that's where this RDA shines. It's nice that they have a single coil airflow insert. It's nice that you can build in single coil and it facilitates that. But overall, if you're getting this RDA, you should really be getting it to run as a dual coil RDA. That's where this thing really shines. Yeah, I am like super impressed with this thing. It just has a ton of flavor. It looks fantastic. It's got that kind of curved bell-like shape that the other Recurves have had. The peak airflow inserts, I'm very impressed with those. I did not think that going with peak was going to be kind of the best thing, but so far it has worked flawlessly. The single coil airflow insert works great if you're using a 3mm or 3.5mm. As you go up all the way to 5mm ID coils, the flavor goes down, unfortunately. The 5mm ID coil that comes with it, it's kind of garbage, honestly. It's trash. So the flavor off of it just sucks. It's like the difference between, like, say if you were going to put a 3.5mm ID coil in here and then swap it out for the 5mm ID coil that comes with it, the flavor difference is like going from just straight round wire to like an alien. It's that big of a difference. The 5mm ID coil's flavor was just bland and blah, and there was no punch to it. It was just there, but not very good. Love the flavor off this thing. Like I said, this thing in dual coil setup competes with some of the best dual coil RDAs that have ever been released. It's right up there with practically all of them. Like I said, the Asgard Mini is the only one I can think of that has slightly better flavor. So I definitely think you guys should check out the Recurve version 2 from Wotofo and Mike Vapes. You will not be disappointed. Single coil mode works well as long as you stick to a 3mm or 3.5mm coil. The airflow inserts work just outstandingly. If you like a ton of airflow, or you're one of those people that kind of likes rough, disruptive airflow, you can actually take the airflow inserts out and you just get a ton of airflow, but it is very disruptive, if that sort of explains it. But I love it with dual coil, with the dual coil airflow insert. Flavor off of it is phenomenal. Draw off of it is phenomenal. Everything about this RDA to me is phenomenal, and you'll probably be seeing a lot more of this because I don't see it coming off of this Dreamer 1.5 anytime soon. That's it, guys. Check out the Recurve version 2 from Wotofo and Mike Vapes. Vape on, and I will catch you guys in the next one.